Dana Perino, thank you for joining us on our latest in our Zoom leadership series, where folks all around the country and a few around the world join for what are brown bag lunches with super interesting people. We appreciate your joining us today.
Thanks for having me. What a good looking crew. Look at all these people.
And after so many times I've been on your show, I get to bring you on mine as it is. Smaller audience, but most important, first and foremost, how's America's dog? How's Jasper doing?
Jasper, he's great. For those of you who don't know, I actually tried to do a better backdrop. A fan painted me this portrait of Jasper back here. I'm in my office here at Fox News. Jasper is great. He's going to be 9 in April. I have a felt Jasper here. This is who he is. He's a Hungarian Vizsla. He had a little bit of a illness about a month ago with, it's hard with dogs because they can't tell you what's wrong. So I took him to the vet, and unfortunately they found a malignant tumor just outside of small intestine, but the surgery looks to have been very successful, and it could be that we don't need to do anything else except for monitor and take good care. So thanks for asking. He's a great joy. He's very athletic, super affectionate, and totally silly. I wish he was here because he'd be sitting, here. Thanks for asking. I know everybody loves our dogs, and it's a great way also, I found, it takes away the politics. I have a rule, no politics at the dog park. Most everybody can find some common ground when it comes to the love of animals and pets and dogs. So I wouldn't say I use Jasper, but he has been a great asset to me.
Well, your love of dogs is one of many things I admire, including your love of Seinfeld and your obsessive list making, which I share, and which is featured in Dana's new book, which comes out Tuesday. Although the folks who asked in advance as participating in this will be receiving them, I would imagine, in the mail next week. Yep. So you are an anchor in the morning. You're a co-host for now, I think, a decade of The Five. When anything political is happening, you're on the spot. How do you possibly find time to write now your third book, which I'm betting will be a bestseller?
It's funny. It took me a while to be talked into doing another book, but it built up, and we can explain why later. I look back and I remember during the election that didn't end, I kept thinking, like, who thought it was a good idea to write a book in the middle of an election year and during a pandemic? That would be me. The pandemic actually might have helped me in terms of the writing. I'm too busy during the weekdays with my day jobs to write. So I spent almost all Saturdays and Sundays for many of those weekends in 2020 working on outlines, drafts, turning in what I thought was a great draft, getting it back, reading it again, and thinking, this is crap. I got to rewrite this thing. And then going through all the edits and the finalization towards the end of the year. And now, this is going to sound funny, but I'm amongst friends. I feel like I've been pregnant with this book for 14 months, and it's been in my head, and I've been working on it so much that I'm just very much looking forward to Tuesday when it comes out and everybody has a chance to read it.
Well, I got the advanced copy. I thought it was great. It's wonderfully accessible and practical, and it begs the question. So the first book you wrote was very much autobiographical and about your career and your experiences there. The second, as you pointed out, I'd say helpfully humanized you, maybe to people who didn't already know you, but kind of showed the fact that you're actually a dog-loving, decent, wonderful person. What was the inspiration behind Everything Will Be Okay?
So ever since I had a chance to be the White House press secretary in the Bush 43 administration, I've been sought out by young people, in particular young women, for career advice, sometimes life advice too. So when I wrote And the Good News Is, I included one chapter 5, with, at the time, as much mentoring advice in one place that I could put. I know a lot of people here are willing to do a lot of mentoring, a lot of outreach, and one of the great rewards of having some success is being able to share it, but I could not possibly do as much coffee with these young women that they were asking for. It would have been like, I honestly, actually, even to this day, I could have a full-time job just doing mentoring work, They're in here all day long. This is my office. Like, could I have 15 minutes? 50. So, and the good news is, I thought for efficiency's sake, I'll put all my advice in one chapter. Well, that book did extremely well. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Partly, I think, also because I peeled back the curtain about what it was like to work with President Bush behind the scenes when the media wasn't there. But for years, what kept coming back to me was this feedback that the mentoring chapter really helped people so much. And it was being given as graduation gifts and on and on. So in that book, I had written about what I called my quarter life crisis that I had when I worked on Capitol Hill back in sort of 96, 97. And of course, I got through it. Everybody gets through it. But women, and I don't know if many men are going through this, I don't think as much from my experience in mentoring. We go through this thing called a quarter life crisis, where you finish college and in your first job, maybe you've had a promotion or two, you get to be about 25 and you start to realize, wait, nothing that I imagined for myself is actually coming true. Nothing I planned is working. Like, you might not have the right job. You might not be living in the place where you wanted to be. Madison's nodding her head. So I'm like, I'm nailing this right here with her. You maybe you studied something, you realize, oh wait, that's actually not really what I want to do with my life. You might have thought that you would have had the love of your life commit to you, and that you'd be on your way to having like one child by the time you're 30, and the second one when you're 32, and the second home by the time you're 35, and you start to project out. And my experience for women is that you start thinking, oh my gosh, none of that's coming through. My life's falling apart, blah, 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 and you get all spun up. So you get through it, things move on, and I write about that in that first book. What had bothered me, Bruce, for the last few years is that I noticed that this quarter life crisis was following young women into their 30s and even beyond. So there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves. There are a lot of things that I witness that I think, wow, if you just made a little bit of adjustments to your life and made better personal decisions, took some personal responsibility for things, that you would see your career and your personal life open up in ways that you would be happy finally. I'm happy, serene. I talk about serenity a lot. And I write Everything Will Be Okay. That's the title because, first of all, that's Everything Will Be Okay is something that you tell everybody that you care for or that has ever taken care of you. You think about what you tell your children or your parents or your loved one. We're always trying to assure each other that everything will be okay. Sometimes we forget to tell ourselves that, and that can get lost. But the book is not to say everything will be okay and you don't have to worry about it and you don't have to do anything. It's very much an active book. So I find, my last point I'll make here is that young women are very hungry for advice. Like, they'll do anything for more advice, and what they really want you to do is give them a plan. And if you tell them, okay, well, here's the 10 things you need to do between now and 18 months from now, and then you'll be the White House press secretary, they will do every single one of those things. And when I wrote And the Good News Is, and even now when I look back, so many things that happened to me in my career happened when I didn't plan them. And in fact, the last thing I'll leave you with here is I actually had gone into the White House in early August of 2007. I was going to resign because I talked to my husband and we thought I couldn't do it another 18 months. And I wasn't going to move up because Tony Snow was firmly, there as the press secretary. And I thought, maybe Josh Bolten is right. I don't think I can sprint to the finish here with the president. Fast forward, I go to the office on Monday morning and I saw Ed Gillespie. And I said, could I talk to you after the meeting? He said, yes, I need to talk to you too. Great. Meeting ends. People are filing out. And he says, Dana, can you stay? I said, yes, sure. So I sit down across from him. I can picture this like it's yesterday. And I was so nervous because I didn't really want to leave the White House. But I'd made this commitment with my husband. I was going to do this. And I was so nervous, like burning with anxiety. And I went to just blurt it out. And Gillespie says, do you mind if I go first? And I said, okay, sure. And he said, the president would like you to make you the press secretary on Friday. And I was like, wonderful. What do we need to do to prepare? But inside, I was like, oh my gosh. And if I had gone first, I don't think Ed would have told me, because they wouldn't have thought that I could do it. So my point is, you can have a plan. You can make as many plans as you want, and you just have to actually realize that the plan's not ever going to work. You could be prepared, but the other lesson in that is you should always let the other person go first.
Great advice all around, although I am confident Eddie Gillespie is persuasive enough that had you gone first, he would have quickly.
I don't know.
Yeah,
he didn't. So I never told him, and he didn't know that until he read And the Good News Is, and he called me in the middle of it. He's like, are you serious? I was like, I don't know. And then the first thing I did was call Peter, because he thought I was going to call and say, well, it's done. And, give my 2 weeks notice. And instead it was like, oh my gosh, my life just changed so dramatically. And we got to work. And actually that Friday night, we left on a secret trip to Iraq. So, yeah.
All right. So here's one for you. You're a voracious reader. You include as one of the lessons / pieces of advice that the problem, you had like a 10 and they were all my number one. So I'm not sure how to pick among those. That maybe it's chapter 2, but that great advice. But one of them was keep reading. And it made me wonder. I feel like the best lessons that I've learned, I either learned living, or I learned the hard way, or I saw somebody either succeed or blow themselves up. And I started wondering, how many lessons do I feel like I really internalized and was able to operationalize based upon a book that I read? And as somebody who's now, this is the full book, but the second time you've put it in writing and you've done a lot of mentoring, how much do you believe people can learn and apply lessons based upon what they read? And is that where you learned lessons growing up?
I think it's a combination of everything, right? Your life experiences or things that you read. But I would say, Bruce, that the short story that I lead the book with, the introduction, encapsulates this, what I was trying to say in this book. And I was trying to grab the reader to get them to keep reading. So the example is this. I had a young woman call me from Washington, D.C. She worked for a congressional office, and she was being asked to put out a statement. She's a communications person. She was asked to put out a statement that she thought was off-putting, inappropriate in tone, unproductive, and she really didn't want to put her name on it. So she called me asking advice, like, what should I do? And she thought she would be fired or basically passed over or looked at the wrong way on Capitol Hill if she declined. She didn't think she had an option. And I said, no matter what, don't say it. Don't put the statement out. And she said, well, I don't think I can do that because I'm not Dana Perino. And I said, how do you think I became Dana Perino? And that story I used to get everybody into this book for, like, I write a chapter like, who is Dana Perino anyway? Like, why would you read a book that I wrote? And integrity is your most important asset. And you can't really learn that in a book. You can read about it for sure. Like, there's so many books that I recommend. At the top of the list, of course, Charles Krauthammer's Things That Matter. But you can try to figure it out through somebody else, but you actually just you have to go through it. But I think books like this, or ones like, when I read Peggy Noonan's What I Saw at the Revolution, it really helped me to realize that, oh, I'm not alone in my thinking here. I'm not this alien creature. So I would say the reading part is good, but I also include a ton of podcasts in this book, because I have found that to be so incredibly enriching. Just absolutely amazing that what you can learn and who you can learn from. I love the 14th and G podcast. I listen every week. Sometimes it's too short, I have to say, Bruce, if I were to give any feedback.
We figured, so it's 2021 in 21 minutes. It'll be longer next year.
That's true.
If you're listening in like 60 years, it'll be quite long. So, you go through and you name check for sure Condi Rice, Barbara Bush, but I'm interested in women you considered role models, either famous or people that none of us on this Zoom may have ever heard of.
Well, I'll name two. Actually, some of you here might have heard of her, maybe way back when. And a lot of you maybe also have worked in on Capitol Hill or in government at some point. My first chief of staff that I worked for on Capitol Hill was Holly Probst, and now Holly Probst Sims. I see a couple of people nodding their heads. So she had been a campaign volunteer for Congressman Dan Schaefer. Then she had worked her way up. She had almost every single job. And because the Republicans had been in the minority for so long and there was no social media and 24/7 news cycle, she got a law degree from Georgetown while she was working on Capitol Hill. She eventually becomes the legislative director, then the chief of staff. I come on the scene, new press secretary. I don't know what I'm doing. I got my first press call was from Brian Lee, who worked for Energy Daily. And he asked me how Schaefer felt about the FERC commission. Something was happening with the FERC. And I had to say, could you spell that for me? And I'll never forget. I was like, what is the FERC? I never heard of it in my life. But she was a very professional person, very much in control. She was the boss, but she was accessible to us as well. I remember if everybody in the office, if the LCs had all of their mail done, we could have beers on Fridays. And this is before the gift ban, and Coors Brewing Company would get us beers for the fridge. We always felt bad for Idaho. We're like, what do they get? Potatoes? Like, we got Coors. So we would have that on Fridays. And one of the things I always remember her doing, I think she really helped me be a better writer. I would write draft statements for the congressman, and they would come back so marked up. But eventually I caught on and I learned to be a better writer. The other thing she did, and I do this to this day with my team here, she would copy me or blind copy me if it wasn't appropriate on responses to other chiefs of staff or to the press, or even to the congressman, so that I could see how she would communicate to people. The third thing that she helped me learn was how to manage up. And I think this is such an undervalued skill, although people here might really understand it. I'm trying to teach young people that I meet here that, your job is to make things easier for the people above you. And I would talk about how over time, I don't want to brag. I'm trying to be humble, but I was a very good briefer for President Bush for his style. For if he would say, like, what's going on? Like, here's the thing. Or if I watched somebody floundering, trying to explain it to him, and I could say, oh boy, he's not going to like that. Here's how I would explain it. And so I learned how to manage up, and I think that was a very good skill. So that was my real life role model. I write about her in the book, and I thank her so much. I think all the chiefs of staff, there are so many people who help young people learn on Capitol Hill, and it was such a wonderful experience. I encourage everyone to go work on the Hill. I don't know if that's still true. I hope so for the most part. Sort of a mentor for me, or a role model that was out of reach for me, not a fictional character, was Diane Sawyer. But if you really think back to when I was going through college and graduate school and all my entire upbringing, at the three main television networks, now this is before cable, it was only ever men that were in those top jobs. And there's a saying in mentoring that if you want to be her, you have to see her. And so, for example, the woman, Sarah Thomas, that was the referee at the Super Bowl, she's the first woman to ref a Super Bowl game. It won't be a question for young girls anymore, like, but that's not a girl job. Well, it is now, like, but they can see it. Like, she can actually do it. The third person I would say that I admired, and I thought she was just so cool, was Sybil Shepherd when she was on Moonlighting. And that's a show that some people, like Amy, you remember that show. I just thought she was so cool. Like, oh, wow, she can actually have a career and wear her tennis shoes with her suit and walk to work. I just thought she was so great. So I write a chapter called How to Find a Role Model. I don't believe that mentoring relationships have to be so formal. And in fact, I think young people seem to be believing that until they get a formal mentor, then they're not going to be able to move up in the world. And I just think that's just the wrong way to think about it. You can look at role models from anywhere. My current main role model is Dame Anne Globe. She's a businesswoman from Scotland. The Stagecoach buses, that's she and her brothers started that company. And when it expanded into Europe and Africa, she took the Africa territory she went there and she was very eye-opening. She had been a nurse in her younger life and she was a mother of 5. And she said, oh, this will never do when it came to maternal health and early childhood development. So in addition to the amazing businesswoman that she is, she's also an incredible philanthropist. And she was knighted by the Queen a couple of years ago. And Peter and I got to go and meet her. She's on the board of Mercy Ships. And I just really find that she's got the whole thing. She's got the business, she's got the family, she's got the relationship with God, and she has this philanthropy and giving back that to me is just like, that's the whole package. So she's my current role model.
You're a bit of an Anglophile, of course, as well, but
a little bit.
So and we have a decent number of young women, you know, the exact demographic for the book. In talking to some, I know there's also a question of like, how do I find a mentor? Like, it's easy to look at you. Your book is wonderfully accessible, but so much of this also is, I want somebody I can talk to. And most people won't think they can call you to ask about a press release. How would you say the average person can go about finding that mentor, and how do you broach the conversation? You don't walk up, I don't think, and say, would you be my mentor?
Sometimes I wish that people on Capitol Hill didn't think they could call me all the time for everything, but I am actually pretty accessible, but partly that's just because I love the job. And people are I find young people very respectful of time, and they're just looking for a little bit of help. And I think a lot of people here, whether you are a father or a grandfather of a young woman, or maybe you manage some of them, they do find it hard to express their ambition, especially to more dominant male figures. Look, I don't know why. It's just the way it is. So accepting that that's the way it is, then looking to say, okay, well, how do we help them from there? And one, I can do that. Like, I can be accessible. I also started a thing called Minute Mentoring. It's like speed dating, but mentoring for young women, because I find that most young women have the same questions. There's not always the same answers, but usually they have the same questions. I find that, again, I don't think you have to have like very formal mentoring relationships, but one thing that I do think you can do that works pretty well is ask somebody if you can walk with them to the elevator. Now, that works really well when there's no pandemic. So the book is coming out a year into our 2-week lockdown. And work from home is now really living at work for so many people. And there's no differentiation, especially if let's say you're a young person, you have a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment, and you're trying to make ends meet, and you're basically doing your Zooms all day long from your bed, and then you're supposed to sleep in your bed too. It's just a lot of stress for working from home. Plus, it's not natural to be on camera all day long. I'm used to it. Like, this is what I do for a living. But do you know how many the plastic surgeons are getting more calls than ever right now? Because it's not natural to sit and look at yourself all day long and look at all your flaws and like, oh gosh, I need to fix this and that. So you take the regular pressures of just trying to move up in the workplace, but then now you're working from home. And I've been hearing a lot from people, Bruce, of how do you stand out when you're working from home? How do you move up? How would you possibly get a promotion? I think it is incumbent upon the managers of these young people to do a little bit more of the personal outreach. I know everybody's really, really busy, but like once every couple of weeks, go through your team, like maybe once a day, and you're trying to do that personal outreach. And maybe they won't ever tell you what their ambition is. And I'm sorry if that's my computer doing that. I don't think it is. If they're not willing to tell you your ambition, you might have to tease it out of them a little bit. Because one of the things I say in the book is your boss can't help you get to the next step if they have no idea what you want to do. I find that people are actually quite willing to train people and to move them on. Not always. You'll find people that will make somebody be an executive assistant for 15 years and because they're too afraid of what would happen to them if that trusted, valued employee is not a part of them. I say absolutely not. 2 years max, and then you're kicked out of the nest. You got to go do something else. My experience has been that most people do want to help others, but they can't help you if you don't ask. Getting up the courage to ask, that's a little bit harder, but I go through that in the book. It's to give them a little bit of tips on that too.
Well, no, you're right. And something else, I think a lot of folks worry that if you express ambition about future careers to your boss, maybe they'll move on, somehow protecting themselves. And one thing I think a lot of people fail to appreciate is how valuable it is to have people who used to work for you go off into the world and, and when they're a
Absolutely.
big success, talk about how important you were when you were their chief of staff and they didn't know what FERC was. And that speaking as an employer, it's great to help folks and help them launch successful careers, because besides feel better about yourself, you want to be a workplace that's known as a great place to start for people who have those kind of jobs.
I know I have, there's several people that of course worked with us at the White House that now I look at them like, wow, look at them. But there's a couple of people here. One is now one of the executives at WeWork, and she stayed through all of the troubles and is there trying to help them emerge from all of the problems that they had. And another, she's really doing great at Facebook in the communications team. Like, she's busy. But it's interesting though, and I write a little bit about both of them. Is let me just be honest. So some of these young women that are having this now career success. Okay, now they're mid 30s and one is even late 30s. The pressure that they feel themselves to find someone to get married to and to have children with, their pressure, they feel it, believe me. But what I've seen is that their families are adding some pressure. And they'll say things like, well, she's married to her job and she needs to think of finding someone to marry as one of her jobs. And I just wish that everybody could just back off a little bit on that, because I can see that it's robbing them of some of life's joys, which is something I write about in the book too, is that adding pressure and anxiety to a situation where somebody feels already that they're extremely busy, it's not going to help them. And they're doing great. I'm like, yeah, she has to work on Saturdays because have you seen the headlines? Like, there's some stuff going on. If you do communications at Facebook, you will never not be busy. So she has to work on work-life balance too. But I just mentioned that as something in case anyone is dealing with that in their own lives.
So let's turn, if we can, a little bit to the industries that you've been part of, because both in media and politics, we want young folks to enter and to engage, but both media and politics feel like they're in a bit of a doom loop where increasingly success seems to be the product of how negative can you go on the other side. And I'm both interested in how do we get out of that, but also just, I know you well enough to know the other side is the loyal opposition in your mind. You believe there is good in all Americans, and you'll disagree with people on certain policy issues. How do you think in what feels like a media and particularly social media climate that rewards aggressive hostility as opposed to, finding common ground, how do we get out of that doom loop, and how do we make that more appealing to young folks who don't feel like the only reason to go in it is if you love pugilism?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I love in the decks that you do for your company. You're teasing this out, like we're all trying to figure it out. I'll just give you some personal experiences. 2015 and 16 were not easy for me. I was a Bush person in a Trump world, but over time, by just being myself and not overreacting and not getting myself too opinionated out there on social media, because I had a different job now. I was able to ask questions now and to be somebody that would try to get information and make it entertaining and interesting without actually trying to ever hurt anybody. I've been given this nickname, the voice of reason. And I will have to say, I'm glad. I appreciate that. I'm just being myself, really. I did go through some times though where I was getting so attacked on social media that it really affected me, even as a grown woman. And I remember at one point, I just felt like being in the fetal position under my desk, and my husband would say, "Is there anything I can do?" And fast forward, I wouldn't say I really self-censored myself, but I definitely stopped doing as much social media. I did a couple of things though. I went to a conference where I was talking about this issue, and Van Jones and I were presenting together. And it turns out that he had the exact same experiences. And I realized, I'm like, oh, so I was not alone. like you think that you're all alone in that kind of a thing. And actually you think everyone's thinking about you. And the great thing that you learn over and over again as a human is that nobody's thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. But Eric Schmidt of Google pulled me aside after that conference, or at that conference, and he talked to me about bots. And I didn't really understand that that's what was happening, and why all of the criticism sounded exactly the same, but a lot of it was like, some of it was not spelled quite correctly. And he said, change your settings so that you only you only see replies from people you follow. So I thought worth a try. And do you know that I would say 99% of all the negativity went away overnight? And I will always be grateful to him to reaching out to me and Van to tell us that we were not being attacked by real people. And so I talk a little bit about how you have to take responsibility for your social media. You can't let it rule you. And then when it comes to your other question, which is how do you get people to want to be involved? I find that there are so many people that actually still want to work on the policy. There's not that many people that just want to write mean tweets. And if they do, there's a place for that, I guess. I don't know how long lasting that can be for a career. Well, some people might be giving it a try. I do think that there's more people like that. My last point on this, though, that I don't know what to quite do about it. I went to the Capitol Hill and did a brown bag lunch with Senate communicators. And I was really excited to be there, and I was excited to hear from them. And about halfway through, I realized that they all just seemed so sad. And I stopped and I said, is anybody here having any fun? They said no. And I think one of the reasons, Bruce, is that I don't think the members are having any fun either. They're not joyous. They're not together. And now with COVID, like nobody's getting a drink after work. If you think that that the tone is set from the top, then we as adults need to do a little bit better on that front.
Although, so I spend, as you're right, I spend a lot of time thinking about what's wrong and how might we fix it. And it does feel to me there are two different things. One is leadership matters. You take a George W. Bush, a George H.W., a Ronald Reagan, and they are trying to, see the other side as the loyal opposition. It's not true of all leaders, but there's also the systemic challenge of what gets rewarded. And once upon a time, there's a discussion about whether bringing earmarks back is actually going to help greater collegiality. And the theory of yes is now you can get something for your district. The theory of no is, in the old days, you would succeed because you would help your district. In the new days, you succeed because you're a media star who hops a plane and, I don't know, goes to Wyoming to dunk on the local member of Congress, and you're a rock star. You raise all this money. Do you have any thoughts on whether it's just a matter of the right leader pulls us out of it, or whether we're going to have to figure out how to deal with the systemic challenge?
Well, I think in that regard, I don't know if it's possible. We'll see. One, I think you have to beat them, right? So we're talking about the Wyoming race in 2022, the congressional race. If you think about Mitch McConnell with the Tea Party, what did they learn after that first go around? That you had to try to win and you had to fight early on. So primaries matter. I think primaries are going to maybe matter more than they have in the past. And how do you get that word out? I don't know. I also think Barbara Bush had a great saying. She told me, I asked her what was the secret to a good marriage, and she said that both parties have to be willing to go 60% of the way there. And I think that is true also in maybe in negotiations and in business, but also certainly in Congress. Is there going to be any reward in trying to reach out? I would think of the most recent situation where you had 10 senators that went to the Oval Office with President Biden to talk about some possible negotiation when it came to the American Rescue Plan or the COVID relief bill, whatever you call it. And there's a few reports out there where Susan Collins, a senator from Maine, said that Joe Biden seemed quite receptive, and he's nodding along. He's like, yeah. She said, but in the background, Ron Klain, the chief of staff, who I recently heard this week, somebody called him Prime Minister Ron Klain. And honestly, I doubled over laughing. I thought that was so funny. I like Ron Klain very much. And I thought that description was just perfect, but that he was in the back behind President Biden in the Oval Office, shaking his head no the entire time. And Susan Collins says, well, we kind of knew that it was kind of pointless. And then Shelley Moore Capito, again, she was also in that meeting, and she told me today on air that she thought Joe Biden really was willing to do it, but that the staff wasn't. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's just the posturing and a strategy that they have, or maybe it is true. Biden ran on one, that he was not going to be Trump, but also I think he really did want to think about unity. It's just not working out that way so much. Perhaps once we get the American Rescue Plan passed and $2 trillion in the economy, that will open up some space for people to get along with things. But especially when both sides are really going to be at each other's throats, the left is calling Senator Manchin President Manchin because he's got so much power now. So there's a lot of dynamics happening in both parties, let alone intra-party.
So Amy Rainford, who's attending and emailed a question in advance, and I liked her question, which I will ask. At a time when so many of your colleagues have become the story, how have you managed not only to stay out of the fray yourself, but to be seen as a leader?
I try so hard to never be in any story. There's a media outlet called Mediaite, and Mediaite is like a trade paper. It's like the school paper for media. And I don't have it bookmarked. I follow it on Twitter, but I always forget to look. But if I'm ever on Mediaite, it really is upsetting. Now, some people, they like being on Mediaite because it gets attention for your show and everything. Maybe I should do a little bit more of that, but I've never really been one to want to have more attention that way. And this dovetails back to your earlier question about how do you get young people to want to do this, or how do you figure out a way to navigate this world? I have described it sometimes as crossing a river of crocodiles many times a day, trying not to get bit. But I've just been myself. And then over time, it all worked out. And I have this great new schedule. I love co-anchoring the morning show with Bill Hemmer, America's Newsroom. He is joyous in his work. It is wonderful to have a co-host that is so smart, well-read, interesting, funny, and a little bit light on his feet, I would say, in terms of we take the news seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. So that's just one of the ways. I figure if I'm just doing my thing in my way, that opportunities will eventually come my way. Even if I think I should plan, I realized even like with this opportunity, I had no idea they were going to ask me to do this with Bill Hemmer, but they did, and it's fantastic.
Awesome. So 2 more questions, and then I've got to go feed Max the dog and make sure
he gets midday snack.
He's the COVID-15 definitely arrived, but he's been struggling. Amy and I overwalked him, and so now we cut the big meals into smaller parts. I got to go get preserve and bubble wrap all of my Dr. Seuss collection. But so first, what's the best part of your job? What do you enjoy doing the most in all of the various things you do?
So I think it's all of the reading. When I was in 3rd grade, my dad started a tradition with me where I had to read the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post before he got home from work. And I had to choose 2 articles to discuss before dinner. And that started this lifelong love of news. And I really feel that even if I wasn't doing this job, I would still be doing as much of this news consumption because I just really love it.
How old were you at the time?
3rd grade, so 8 and 9.
Okay. I think my daughter at that age would have told me to get lost. But so with all of these, we've always tried to end, and you know me, I have what I'm told is called toxic positivity. Sorry. But I'm relentlessly optimistic. And we always ask folks at the end of these, what have you seen over the last year that gives you hope? What makes you feel like we're heading to a better place as a country, as a world, or more narrowly?
I'm very bullish on the people that I wrote this book for. I feel that the millennials and Generation Z, they got a lot of heart. Like, they got problems. I get it. But They got a lot of heart, they got a lot of innovation, and also history has found them. If you're a millennial, you might have seen your parents deal with the financial crisis and the fallout from that. Now here you are starting your family, or you're in your second or third job, and all of a sudden the pandemic hits and you're working from home at your dining room table and trying to do school from home for your kids. What I found is that they are very resilient and innovative, and they have really big hearts. I'll give you one example. There's a young woman named Elizabeth Mignon, and she lives in Bayhead, New Jersey. Well, she was living in the city. She graduated in December of 2019 with a degree in event management. She got a great job in New York City to do events, and then the lockdown. So she lost her job. She went home. She wasn't sure what to do. How are you gonna get an event planning job working from home? And then as things went on, she wanted to stay busy. Well, her grandmother was an interior designer and had lots and lots of beautiful fabrics. And she saw all the news about the fact that the nurses needed more PPE and masks. So she just started making masks. And then she would choose a local hospital and take a bunch of masks over to them. Well, slowly but surely, more people wanted these masks because they were so cute. So she started a little business. And then she hired like 5 more young women to help sew for her. And then she bought an embroidery machine. Well, now she has this full-fledged business. She's called Elizabeth Taylor, Tailor. And I'm like, look at you. You did it. You might go back to doing event planning, but you've proven that you can get through this. So I have a lot of great hope, but also confidence in this younger generation. And also I would say this, we all had, I hope maybe all of us here, but we had the great fortune of being born in America. So we already won life's great lottery. And if you are an educated person in America, there's really nothing you can't do except for think about how hard do you want to work? What do you want to do?
That's awesome. And I might add one last thought, which is what you've just done as well. Anybody who's feeling bad about themselves, find somebody to help.
Yes.
Nothing, I mean, you're mentoring. Part of it, I know, is you want to give back, and you talk about paying it forward, paying it back. But nothing makes you feel better about who you are and where you are and your place in the world than helping people who need more help. And when you can do stuff like that, and I think this book is a terrific way to reach a mass audience beyond the 100 and however many we had on Zoom today. Dana, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Good luck to our pal Jasper, and we'll keep watching on TV.
He's right here. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.